Hi, my name is Nick Broughton, and I'm a Randomfish. Hit that subscribe button and let's all be Randomfishes together, shall we? I am a child of the 90s. Yeah, I was born in 1990, and I was pretty much raised in that world ever since. My parents were loving and amazing people, and they gave me access to a lot of things that I wanted. There's a lot of things that I didn't get that I wanted as well, but that's neither here nor there. But one of the things that I managed to get a hold of eventually throughout my young life was Pokemon. Specifically, the Pokemon craze. I started playing the games first way back in, I think, 95, 96. Possibly a little bit beyond that. And since then, I was obsessed. I was obsessed with Pokemon. I wanted to watch the show, see as many episodes as I could, and the ones that you could find on British television, considering that it was an American TV show, and was really only aired through, you know, special channels you could get through a special box on your TV, which we didn't have at the time. I caught what I could, and it was a great show. And this led to 1999, me forcing my older brother to take me to go see Pokemon the first movie, Mewtwo Strikes Back. I remember being so emotionally invested in this world, in the Pokemon world, in the movie itself, in the characters, and I remember absolutely adoring it. Like I said, I'm a child of the 90s. And then, some years later, 21 years later, on my 30th birthday, last Thursday, I looked upon Netflix and I saw Mewtwo Strikes Back Evolution, a CG recreation of the first movie. With some changes, a couple of different people had different lines and all this sort of thing, and things were all thrown together in a variously descriptive way, and it was nice. And I thought, to hell with it. I'm going to watch this remake, and I'm going to see exactly what it is that translated so well to CG, and why they chose to do this remake. Why they didn't do something new with it. Why they didn't take it in a different direction. Maybe they could have done an evolution on the Mewtwo story that hadn't yet been done. Now bear in mind, there's been multiple Pokemon movies over the years. And when I say multiple, I mean multiple. By the time I got to about 14, 15 years old, there have been 3 of them. Pokemon the first movie, Pokemon the movie 2000, and of course Pokemon 3. Those were the 3 films that I primarily loved. So, really, I wasn't that massive with the CG movement on Pokemon. At least, not to the extent that other future generations would eventually become at their young age. By the time other Pokemon movies were being released, I was more into the games than I was into watching anything of the show, in the anime sense. Not because I didn't like it, but because I honestly kind of just preferred playing the games. I thought it was easier, I thought it was better, and frankly I had more fun catching the Pokemon than I think I did anything else. But, like I said, on my birthday not that long ago, they released the remake. The CG entirety remake. So, how does it stack up to the first one? Because let's face it, you are going to compare the two. This is not a shot-for-shot remake, though. I want to make that clear. This isn't a Gus Van Sant moment, where, you know, he made a complete shot-for-shot remake of the movie Psycho. Because, let's face it guys, that would have almost been disastrous. And there are some risks that they take with the CG movie. Obviously with the CG being the way it was, there were things that were elevated in this movie that they couldn't have pulled off back in 1999. It just wouldn't have been possible. And frankly, I applaud them for that. Not because I happen to think that one movie is better than the other, but because I do believe that every movie at any point will be updated and will be elevated through technological advancement. And CG did that to a T with this movie. While I may not always agree with the way they shoot things in a full CG environment, I cannot deny this. The battle sequences that you see are incredible, and with some very impressive situations, very impressive shots, and you feel a lot more impact of the battle than anything else. The battle between the clones and the original Pokemon in that climactic moment in the first movie is so much better in the remake than it ever would have been in the original. And that entire sequence when Ash is looking down and seeing everything that happens is incredible. But I'm getting ahead of myself. For those of you who haven't seen the original Pokemon the first movie and have not seen the new CG film, well, I don't quite understand why you're watching this video, but I'll give you a brief update anyway. In Pokemon the first movie, Mewtwo is created as a clone of the Pokemon Mew, considered to be one of the rarest and most powerful Pokemon to have ever existed. At this very point, Mewtwo then gets enraged by this concept that he was created by humans and was basically perceived to be nothing more than a lab specimen. He destroys the lab in a fit of rage using his psychic powers that are very prominently displayed at that very point. He is then approached by Giovanni, the leader of the antagonistic version of Team Rocket. Giovanni is not seen much throughout the original Pokemon show because he was always kept in shadow. In this, you actually see him in proper view, in the original and in the remake. Giovanni, however, promises Mewtwo a partnership and lies, basically using him as a tool to capture Pokemon for Team Rocket's enterprises. Using the phrase that is used more in the original film than it is in the remake, but I'm going to use this line anyway. You were created by humans to obey humans, you could never be our equal. And honestly, that tears Mewtwo apart, to the point where he destroys the gym where he currently is, or the lab that he currently is, which is hosted by Giovanni. Now, you don't actually see Giovanni escape, but we all know that he does because he appears later on in other movies, but that's a story for another time. Mewtwo blows up this secondary place and goes flying off and returns back to the lab where he was originally created, or rather the exploded site. He then decides that at this point he was going to create his own purpose, because no one appears to be answering that question for him, as to why he's here. So he decides, much to his own personal annoyance, that both humans and Pokemon are a waste of time, and that clones, like himself, should be the ones to inherit the planet. He then encourages and sends out various invitations to a whole bunch of trainers, up to and including the likes of Ash Ketchum, Misty, and Brock. The three of them, along with their various Pokemon, go to the harbour where a storm has started that Mewtwo has apparently begun using his psychic powers himself, whilst on the island that he has clearly rebuilt into his own personal lab slash fighting place slash personal throne room. He brings about the storm, and a whole bunch of the trainers try and make it through the storm to get to the island to face the so-called greatest Pokemon trainer ever, which is what's said in the invitations. Ash, Misty, and Brock, along with three other trainers, reach the island, and they are greeted by the woman who sent out the invitations and also appeared in them as a hologram, because Mewtwo didn't want to reveal its identity. Upon all congregating in the throne room, they meet Mewtwo, and the battle ensues, with the Pokemon trainers obviously being very confused as to how a Pokemon can be a Pokemon Master without it actually happening. And so Mewtwo reveals the first of his three clones, the originals from the very first game. Do you remember those, kids? I doubt it somewhat, because there's no way in hell. Also, if you're a kid, you're not watching this video. Charmander, Bulbasaur, Squirtle. Those are the three original starters in the original run. That's fine. In this setup, with the clones, he has turned them into their evolved forms of Charizard, Venusaur, and Blastoise. The three of the trainers, that being one of them being a guy in an orange jumpsuit, the other one being the token girl of the three, and Ash, all have their respective starter Pokemon. They have, one of them has a Venusaur nicknamed Brute Root, the other one has a Blastoise nicknamed Shell Shocker, and Ash of course has Charizard. And if you've watched the anime, you know the instant problem with Charizard. He is a disrespectful, arrogant bugger of a character. He instantly takes a dislike to Mewtwo and starts trying to blow him up, which of course doesn't work. But then of course you have a whole bunch of other stuff. You have the fight between the three originals and the three clones, which the clones win by a landslide. The two actually who last the longest are Venusaur and Charizard, which is incredibly interesting. Because Blastoise, through multiple people that I've seen on YouTube, has always been declared the best of the starters in the originals. Not just by various YouTubers talking about this stuff, but also by the group of Death Battle, who pitted all three starters against each other in a massive fight. So, you know, I'm just saying. Out of the three of them, it's kind of nice that Venusaur and Charizard were the ones to survive the longest. But then we get Mewtwo's new surprise. He summons Pokeballs using his psychic powers and sends them flying off, and they capture all of their Pokemon, including all of Ash's, Brock's, and Misty's. But these are differently designed Pokeballs. They're black with a little eye in the middle, almost like the Eye of Osiris, not quite as cool. And these are Pokeballs that are more powerful than even the Master Ball in the game is, given the fact that even if you send your Pokemon back into the Pokeball, you can capture them within these balls. As in, these Pokeballs will hit the original Pokeballs and absorb them as well as the Pokemon. Okay? Upon Pikachu's capture, Ash, who is more attached to Pikachu than any other of his Pokemon, because frankly Pikachu's the only one of his Pokemon that survives all of the anime incarnations, weird, goes down into the chamber where a whole bunch of the cloning has been taking place. All the clones then get sent out from the tubes and out into the world. Well, Mewtwo then says, okay, you can go now. The storm's still happening. Good luck surviving the storm, but you can go. It's fine. I have what I want. And all the clones come rushing in a vague attempt to make it look like intimidation, and then Ash appears with all the originals. And he says there's no way that he's going to let Mewtwo do this. He even runs forward trying to punch Mewtwo in the chest, which doesn't work because Mewtwo sends him flying and nearly kills him. Upon this, we then get the reveal of one of the greatest, cutest, and possibly the best of the Pokemon in this movie. I know I put up an Instagram post not that long ago saying I love Charizard the most out of all the Pokemon, but he's my favourite based off of that. But Mew is in a different category altogether. Mew is funny as hell. Mew summons a little tiny pink bubble, which Ash lands on and is confused by. Mew then flies in, starts giggling, starts mewing, starts doing all the stuff that he/she, I don't know which gender way Mew is, I think it might be a she, I'm not sure. But flying around, giggling, trying to get stuff, doing stuff, having a laugh, having a fun. And Mewtwo is of course completely flummoxed by this and starts attacking Mew. And the two of them start their little battle, with Mewtwo saying that, the clones are superior because they were created with powers different than the originals and they're greater and blah 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 blah. And Mew says, strength from a real Pokemon comes from the heart, which you only understand because of a Pokemon translator called Meowth, who is part of the trio of Team Rocket. I only mention this now because they're so different from the rest of the main plot that their stuff is practically, how do I put this, near pointless. I don't mean to rat on Team Rocket's parade, but their primary use in the show was that they were the antagonists of the show. And in this movie, that's kind of been taken away by Mewtwo. So Team Rocket don't really have much of a purpose to exist, apart from to just be an annoyance. Now don't get me wrong, they help them get to the island in the beginning part of the film, that's fine. But, I mean, I'm going to get to that in the analysis portion in just a second. But upon this point, Meowth translates that Mew gives off all this stuff saying that Pokemon's real strength comes from the heart. Mewtwo then says, okay, fine. I'll block all the special attacks that the Pokemon use using my psychic powers. They'll just fight, and now we'll see what happens. It then leads on to a giant fight that Ash sees from above as he's climbing down from the giant statue that he got flown towards by Mewtwo after he tried to kill him. At which point, you then see all of this stuff happening, and then you get the attempted moral message of the movie, which is to go, we shouldn't fight. Given the fact that the film is based off of a game that is primary usage is fighting, little bit problematic. But, I mean, to be honest, I kind of just ignored that whole bit, to be honest with you. Mainly because I was 9 at the time, and I don't think I really knew any better when I first watched it, and as I got older, I just sort of went, okay, fine, this is a hypocritical film, I don't really care. I think I just stopped caring about that, to be honest. At which point then, you then get Ash doing the traditional thing that all protagonists do in these main anime series. They go, why do we have to fight all the time? What is with this? And some innocent child gets caught in the blast. Only this time, it's Ash who gets caught in the blast. Which leads on to the saddest part of the movie. Ash turns to stone, thanks to a blast from Mew, and Mewtwo hits him, turns him to stone for some reason. Pikachu then tries to wake him up by electrocuting him. Nothing's happening, so Pikachu starts crying because he thinks he's lost Ash. At which point, all the Pokemon start crying because they're like, oh my god, a human's dead. Oh, this sucks. Oh no. And they start crying, and their cries bring him back to life. It's a very aww moment, and something that all kids across the world, myself included, cried our eyes out at, because they knew how to tug at our heartstrings, because, you know, they were aiming it at kids. What did we expect was going to happen? Mew and Mewtwo then start having that conversation where Mewtwo says, okay, well in that case, I can see I kind of screwed up on that. It's not about how we come into this world, it's what we do with ourselves while we're here, blah 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 blah. Mew agrees, and Mewtwo leaves with all of his clones and then says, right, I'm really grateful for what's happened. You guys are probably best to forget about this, so I'm going to erase all your memories. So he does. And the end of the film is literally them all at the port again going, why are we here? Because they never received any invitations. It's kind of like that whole it was a dream kind of mentality, only in this case it kind of isn't, because we see Mewtwo later with all the clones again. So it did happen, but at the same time to them it didn't happen. Oh, I hate movies that end like that. It bugs me. So, what are the biggest differences between the two films? Apart from the CG, like I said before, the battle scenes are infinitely better in CG, because frankly it gives them more movement, gives them more ability, gives them more stretch to do these things, and it also gives the presence of a lot more power within the film, which is great. I love that. Here are the things where I have issues. Number one, Mewtwo's character. It appears that they're trying to enhance him a little bit throughout the film, in the new version anyway. But in this one, I kind of just liked this idea that he was so prolifically sort of inwardly thoughtful, so introverted, to the point where he was saying, I'm not introverted, that's the wrong word, but he's thinking inwardly a lot, and he's saying stuff like, is that why I'm here? Is this my purpose, to be just an experiment, a laboratory specimen? No. And he starts blowing stuff up. Or, you know, when he's facing when he's talking to Giovanni, and Giovanni uses the line of, you were created by humans to serve humans. You could never be our equal. And Mewtwo's exact line to him in the original film is, humans may have created me, but they will never enslave me. And I love that line. I think that's a genius line. I love it. Or is all my other... a line of his that he uses twice in the movie, which is very cool, is, this cannot be my destiny. And I like that line. It's a good line. Not just because it's repeated, but because I like the implications of it. And I like the way it's kind of this core of his character. Him saying, what you think you want for me is not my destiny. I do not have to deal with this. I am my own master. Like, this is how this has to be. In this one, it feels more like he's... the constant questioning that he doesn't really integrate to someone who wants to take charge of themselves, but someone who's just asking the question over and over again and expecting to get an answer from people who've already given him an answer that he doesn't like. So, I mean, I'm sorry, I can't sympathize with that Mewtwo. I sympathize with the old Mewtwo because he took charge of what he wanted. He knew that he didn't want this, so he eradicated it and got away and started to do some more thinking, had a better idea about this. He didn't ask the questions until he himself had to be the one to answer them. And this is where it comes from for me. Mewtwo is the perfect encapsulation of what I like to refer to as reaching that age. For those people who are painfully aware of this sort of thing, mostly adults I would assume, when you reach a certain age, be it 18, be it 21, be it whatever, you take a very hard look at yourself and you say, what am I doing? Because when you're in school, when you're a teenager, you have two things. You have one, either the dreams that you think you want, when in actuality you don't always know if they're going to happen, or two, what you're being told you want by a system of oppressive regimes who are designed to sort of to teach you the basics of how to function in the world, but not how to truly feel in the world, which is something that I had a lot of when I was younger. And as you reach a certain age in your life, you begin to question it for yourself. You sit there and say, what do I think my purpose is? What do I think my purpose in life is? Everything like that is constant. It's over and over and over again. And honestly, that was a cool thing to see, especially at 9 years old. I loved it. And I love the fact that Mewtwo said he will find his own purpose. And honestly, it was cool to see that sort of thing. But, like I said, the Mewtwo character, I find him better in the original than in the remake. But that's just because, honestly, I think I liked the assurance of the old Mewtwo to the new Mewtwo. I understand that we question everything in life, but at the same time, unless you're willing to create your own answers, I fail to see why we would ask the question again and again to people we know will only ever give them the same answer. And it's kind of annoying to a lot of people. The only other thing that I feel like I want to bring up is the music. Now, I say this is the only other thing I want to bring up. This is the kind of thing that I want to bring up in terms of what they could have done to make it better. I'm going to explain what that means in a minute once I cover this. But what I want to talk about is the music. The music in the original was this grandeur. It was this... I don't know how else to describe it. It was a combination... it might just be the 90s kid in me. This felt like a very 90s style track, maybe. Maybe that's just me. I'm not talking about the pop song that plays when Ash looks down on the arena and sees all the Pokemon fighting each other. That's not what I'm talking about. But I'm talking about stuff like Mewtwo's theme. That was epic, and I loved it. But in the remake, it feels very... how do I put this? Artificial. It feels artificial, the music. I don't know why. It just does to me. Maybe it feels different to you guys. Maybe you listened to it and you loved the music. You got really caught up in it and it really helped you feel the emotion of the moment. I just didn't have the same emotional hit, or it didn't have the same emotional resonance with me that the original had. Now, some of you might be thinking, but that's because you were 9 when you first experienced it. It would have had a much stronger emotional resonance with a 9-year-old. But you're 30 now, so how can you possibly have the same emotional resonance with something like that? I'm here to tell you people that when it comes to music, anyway, I can well up at these things. If I hear a specific piece of music that's done really, really well, and I think of a certain event when it's being played to me, if I'm seeing something on the screen that goes well with that music that is so emotionally crippling or so powerful, I will cry. I cried in Endgame. And it was a combination of the characters all returning and the music that swelled up during that Portals moment. That got me crying. You know, these are the things that I'm talking about. Emotional resonance for anything in terms of music will hit you no matter what your age. And that is something that I honestly felt like sometimes this movie was lacking. Don't get me wrong. I thought it was a great piece of music. Don't get me wrong. I love the composer. It just felt more artificial to me to a point where I just didn't feel the same connection. And I didn't feel the same emotional resonance to the piece. That is what I feel music should do. Especially something that's powerful. For example, the Ash being turned to stone scene and the Pokemon crying scene, I could not cry at that. I cried at the original. I cried at the original being in my 20s. The music is still powerful. It still hit me. It still resonated with me. This didn't. Like I said, just artificial. But calling back on the things that I feel like they could have helped. Things like, when you create an entirely CG project, I'm going to be honest, The character designs are not going to be as good. They're just not. And honestly, that's okay, because there are going to be pitfalls to everything. There were pitfalls to the original 2D animation of Pokemon. Now there's downsides to the CG animation. That's fine. I'm fine with that. But the thing that ultimately amused me so much was that I loved the difference between the humans and the Pokemon. The humans were not as good. But maybe I'll let you guys decide for yourself. Go see Pokemon the first movie. Mewtwo Strikes Back Evolution on Netflix. Randomfish out.